Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Infobright's webinar on how to embed Infobright Enterprise Edition for competitive advantage. My name is Jeff Kibler. I serve as one of the technical resources here for the company. I will be your host today, and alongside me will be Michael Hackney. Before we get started, we do have a few logistical items to take care of. First and foremost, all of the slideware / review of the presentation will be made available by this time tomorrow. So check your inboxes in case you'd like to share or rewatch any and all of the presentation. That should be made available to you sometime this time tomorrow. In addition, if you do have any questions for either presenter, please feel free to go ahead and add it to the Q&A section of the webinar area. If the question is relevant to that particular slide, we will go ahead and answer the question right then and there. In the event that it's not pertinent, we will go ahead and wait for a Q&A section at the end of the discussion. If you do have any technical issues or audio problems, please reach out to one of the hosts, and we'll make sure we can take care of that issue for you. With that said, I would like to now introduce Michael Hackney. He is the head of product development for Infobright. He'll be walking through how Infobright can help achieve a winning strategy for OEMs in a very challenging market. He will discuss also how Infobright's Enterprise Edition can be easily embedded and placed into the OEM market, as well as provide customer examples. At the end, we will do a Q&A section, including me, Jeff Kibler, as well as Mr. Hackney. And with that, I'd like to introduce Michael Hackney, who will discuss through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Infobright is headquartered in North America, and we have sales, development, partner offices around the globe. We developed a high-performance analytic database platform that's been in market for about 9 years, and we have more than 450 OEM and direct customers with thousands of deployments. Here are a few logos from the many market-leading providers in telecom, network security, ad tech, and financial services who OEM Infobright's platform today. One of the big challenges facing virtually every company today is that as their data volume increases, it becomes more and more difficult to extract meaningful value that can be used to enable better business decisions. Simple reporting is not usually sufficient. The only way to drive value out of this ever-increasing data is to use sophisticated analytics. Analytics drive insights that lead to better customer and market understanding. This understanding can lead to innovative products, better customer targeting, improved pricing, and superior revenue and profit growth. And there are many other areas where analytics can drive tremendous value for your customers. Since you're attending this webinar, it's a safe bet that you're either trying to get ahead of the curve or your customers are already asking you for help. Customers want to store more and more data for longer periods of time. They're probably also asking to query as fast as new data is loaded into the system. And of course, they want to do these things without making significant investments in additional resources. We're seeing a lot of solution providers, particularly those who are already delivering some form of data management and analytics capabilities, experiencing problems with their products breaking under the strain of both increased data volume and the rate at which data is being generated. Providers who are just starting to introduce these capabilities into the solutions are faced with a completely different challenge. They need to architect and deploy their solutions not only for today's demand, but in preparation for future growth as well. And this all leads to the classic solution provider battle. How do you accelerate product delivery and keep up with customers' data growth and performance requirements while maintaining or improving margins? As a solution provider ourselves, Infobright is very familiar with this battle. So what are your options to improve or introduce analytic capabilities into your solution? You could stick with what you have, but that's not usually a viable option given customer expectations and market requirements. And continued investment in a homegrown solution usually doesn't make good business sense. The other alternative is to rip and replace with either an open source or commercial solution. There are a number of open source options, but open source is rarely a free lunch. Open source licensing can be difficult to navigate and may not be suitable for some OEM business models. And with open source, you have to invest in third-party support. These add to the true cost of ownership. Commercially supported offerings like Infobright can meet your analytic requirements, but the pros need to be weighed against cost. The path you choose will depend on many factors. Like many other solution providers, we think you'll discover that Infobright can meet your requirements in a cost-effective and easy-to-integrate analytic database. And over the next few slides, I'll show you exactly how we can do that. Infobright's technology was designed from the ground up to power big data applications. Our unique technology provides for fast ad hoc queries without the need to index, partition, or create projections in cubes. As data volumes increase, load speed and storage become significant challenges for many database technologies. Our technology can achieve very high data ingest rates, while it also compresses the data to use significantly less storage hardware and have less impact on the network. And these capabilities lead to lower cost of ownership, as less storage hardware and servers are required, and there's significantly less administrative overhead. And finally, Infobright can usually be implemented in days, not the typical weeks or months with other solutions. Infobright utilizes a columnar database and is designed for fast analytics. As data is loaded, it's optimally compressed to minimize the amount of storage hardware required. The combination of the columnar store, compression, and our patented knowledge grid architecture makes for fast ad hoc query performance, but doesn't require ongoing database tuning or administration. And these factors all contribute to Infobright's very low cost of ownership. Depending on your use case, column-oriented databases can offer some significant advantages. Traditional row-oriented databases are better suited for transactional environments, such as a call center, where a customer's entire record is required when their profile is retrieved. Column-oriented databases are better suited for analytics, where only a few columns from each record are needed. Infobright is built for speed and complex analytical queries that ask questions about the data, such as trends and aggregates, rather than questions that retrieve entire records. Only columns that are relevant to the query need to be retrieved. This greatly reduces the overall time, I/O, and memory needed. Infobright's column-oriented approach provides significant benefits to OEMs demanding high-performance analytics. Now let's take a closer look at Infobright's unique and patented knowledge grid architecture. This architecture is comprised of the column-oriented store, data packs, and the knowledge grid itself. I'll describe these components in more detail over the next few slides, but I wanted to show you a high-level system view first. The knowledge grid was designed to have the maximum representation of the data in the minimum amount of space. Specifically, the knowledge grid is typically 3 orders of magnitude smaller than the size of the uncompressed data. This compact representation allows the knowledge grid to be maintained completely in memory to improve overall system performance. But like most technologies, there are compromises to these benefits. The knowledge grid architecture works very well if the data exists in a limited number of read-only or read-mostly denormalized tables with very large record counts. These are the attributes of machine-generated data, and if your data is structured in this way, Infobright can provide excellent ad hoc analytic capabilities and scalable data load speeds. And operational benefits include data loading and network efficiency, hardware efficiency, and low total cost of ownership. Oops, thought that slide was going to build. Sorry about that. Infobright's data loading process is where most of the heavy work is performed. As bulk data is loaded, it's formatted into columns, shown here as columns A, B, and C. Each column of data is further divided into chunks of 65,536 elements, or 64K, we call data packs. As these data packs are created, Infobright collects statistics and other metadata about the data and stores it into the knowledge grid. For example, in a numeric type column, we would collect the minimum, the maximum value, average, and other statistics for each data pack and store those in the knowledge grid. Aggregate information about the tables is also collected and stored, and all of this information is collected automatically as data is loaded and stored as different types of what we call knowledge nodes within the knowledge grid. Finally, the data pack is compressed using one of many compression algorithms optimized for the particular type of data. Some of these algorithms are industry standard and others are Infobright patent pending. The overall compression ratio for each data pack depends on the data type and the repetitiveness of data within that data pack. By compressing the data packs individually, optimal compression can be applied to each data pack. And our customers typically see 20-to-1 compression ratios overall, but some have seen compression ratios of 40-to-1 and even higher. Now let's take a look at how the knowledge grid is used to query time. First, remember that the knowledge grid is memory resident and contains all the knowledge nodes describing the data, the tables and the data. Since the knowledge nodes contain summary information about the tables and data, they're used in the first pass to resolve a query quickly and efficiently. In many cases, the answer can be determined directly from the knowledge nodes. If the answer can't be provided by the knowledge nodes in the first pass, another pass uses the knowledge grid to identify which data packs are relevant, which data packs are irrelevant, and which data packs may or may not be relevant or suspect. The goal here is to eliminate data packs that are completely irrelevant to the answer in order to minimize the number of data packs that need to be loaded from disk and decompressed to retrieve the answer to the query. Obviously, the fewer data packs that need to be loaded and decompressed, the faster the query responds. So in a nutshell, this is how Infobright derives its excellent ad hoc query performance. When we first introduced Infobright Enterprise Edition 9 years ago, it integrated with MySQL. This allowed customers already familiar with MySQL to leverage their existing expertise, tools, connectors, SQL, and allowed IE to be an easy drop-in replacement for an existing MySQL-based application with minimal work. Earlier this year, we introduced the IE Postgres edition and provides the same high-performance knowledge grid and data compression that leverages Postgres and its associated tools, connectors, and SQL. So now, OEMs can choose the version of IE that best fits their needs. This is also a good place to mention another component, or what we call the Distributed Load Processor, or DLP. Everything I mentioned in the previous slides about data loading, organizing data into data packs, and creating knowledge nodes can be done using the native loader that's built into IE itself. But the DLP is an optional component that offloads all of this work to its own process. But more than that, multiple DLPs can be leveraged to attain extremely high data load rates. And the DLP also supports an optional Hadoop connector that can be used to extract data from a Hadoop cluster. With the DLP, concurrent loading into a single or multiple tables can achieve load rates of 2 terabytes per hour and higher. Infobright's knowledge grid architecture provides very high ad hoc query performance, and data compression reduces the storage hardware footprint. All of this can be accomplished with Infobright's vertically scalable architecture that can support heavy workloads and over 150 terabytes of raw data per server instance. And this all adds up to significant reduction in capital expenses due to minimal hardware requirements and reduced administrative overhead, since Infobright doesn't require data partitioning, indexes, projections, or other manual tuning. We can also provide flexible licensing that can be tailored to meet your OEM business models. Now let's take a look at several customer use cases. Global leaders like Dell, JDSU, and Polystar are benefiting from Infobright's fast ad hoc query performance, high data load capabilities, and high data compression to meet the challenging demands of their customers. JDSU provides services and integrated solutions to the world's largest network operators. One of their main products, Session Trace, is used by the Tier 1 to Tier 3 carriers for troubleshooting and issue resolution on the network. When Session Trace's principal architect, Chuck Gruber, came to us, he had a list of requirements he needed to meet for the next version of Session Trace. As you might expect, Session Trace customers were experiencing rapid data growth due to increasing call volumes and this growth was only expected to increase over time. Chuck needed a database solution that could handle the high load speed, but also be able to compress the data to reduce storage hardware and increase the data retention period. And of course, he needed to provide exceptional ad hoc query performance and reduce the overall cost of ownership of the solution. With Infobright, Chuck was able to meet and exceed these goals. Infobright's Enterprise Edition reduced administrative overhead and provided the exceptional data load rates and query performance JDSU required and their customers required. Infobright's data compression allowed him to reduce the storage hardware requirements 5-fold while increasing the data retention period 3-fold. Infobright was an integral part of Session Trace that allowed JDSU to achieve the results they and their customers required. Just to put things in perspective, JDSU's Tier 1 network operators can store between 700 terabytes to a petabyte of data, and they collect and analyze terabytes of call detail records per hour. It's all stored in Infobright's analytic database. More details of this JDSU use case and a YouTube video of Chuck describing his requirements and how Infobright helped him meet these are available on our website at infobright.com. Next, I'd like to take a look at Polystar. Polystar is a leading telecommunications supplier based in Stockholm, Sweden. They provide world-class customer experience management and service assurance applications to the leading global telecom operators. With the rise of social networking, machine-to-machine services, location-based services, and mobile commerce, Polystar's customers were experiencing accelerated data growth that provided an unprecedented level of detail on network and user behavior. But the database and the network probes responsible for collecting this data at the heart of Polystar's Jupyter application was not able to keep up. To quote Polystar's Chief Technology Officer, Thomas Nielsen, we faced a lot of problems uploading and storing the growing amount of data we were collecting. As we approached 1 billion records a minute, MySQL, our current database, couldn't handle it. Data growth not only had an impact on data load performance, but Polystar's customers were also finding out that query performance was significantly reduced, and queries actually failed as the database grew in size. Polystar turned to Infobright to address the requirements for very fast load speeds, exceptional ad hoc query performance, high data compression, and reduce the overall total cost of ownership. With Infobright, Polystar's customers benefited immediately. I think Thomas's feedback after they integrated Infobright summed it up very nicely, to quote, Infobright allows our customers to get access to their data in minutes and ask all the questions they have in any way they want to get the results they need. Our customers greatly appreciate this powerful capability, especially since they don't need to spend any time tuning or indexing. Internal users have access to this data quickly and automatically without the months of manual effort it used to take. The Polystar use case, along with many others, are also available on our website. In addition to great technology, Infobright makes good business sense too. We understand that in the OEM world, one size does not fit all when it comes to pricing. Our pricing flexibility allows us to support your business models. Also, Infobright offers 24/7 service level agreements for mission-critical applications, and we encourage our OEM partners to participate in our software beta program to gain early access to new features and capabilities. And we also offer on-site or remote training to meet your training needs. Infobright has helped hundreds of OEMs deliver solutions with demanding requirements for data load speeds, ad hoc query performance, low administrative overhead, small hardware footprint, and aggressive total cost of ownership. We welcome the opportunity to see how we can help you meet your analytic database needs. I'd like to thank you for attending today's seminar, and as Jeff mentioned earlier, Jeff and I will be available to answer any questions you may have now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. I do appreciate it. And ultimately, we had a number of questions that came in throughout the presentation. I think for the most part, they have been addressed, but we can bring up a couple of ones I think came after particular slides. So now we're going to walk through a lot of the technical questions that were had. So if you have any and any that you'd like to add, please feel free to add those to the Q&A section now, and we'll be glad to add those to the list today. We really do appreciate it. So first on our list excuse me, first on our list, what typical hardware footprint do you require to run, and is there a minimal configuration? It's a fantastic question. So ultimately, within an OEM environment, we are going to be residing alongside your application, whether it's a front-end BI tool, an ETL tool, whether within an appliance or not. Ultimately, you will have other things running. So configuration is very important. We completely understand. From a footprint point of view, we typically like to see 1 to 2 threads or cores per concurrent query that you're anticipating, and 2 to 4 gigs of RAM per core. That is a very high level. If we had to take a shot in the dark, that's what we typically recommend, at least for an initial POC. All of this will depend upon how the system is architected, the types of queries that are run, and ultimately what resources are truly available on the system. We know we're going to be competing for resources with those other tools and choices, but we know that with our experiences in the past that we're going to be able to find a configuration that works for you. And this actually, a question just came in, is this applicable for both the Postgres version and the MySQL version? And it is. So ultimately, the engine is the same, the requirements are the same. What's really different there is just the outer shell, if you will. The inner guts haven't really changed. Michael, anything to add to that question?
No, I think you about covered it. The only thing I would also add, in addition to the question about what hardware requirements there are, is what operating system platforms Infobright supports. And both our IEE Postgres and our IEE MySQL editions, we support a number of versions of Windows operating system, as well as various flavors of Linux operating systems, including Red Hat Linux, CentOS, and Debian, and others. So back to you.
Very good. Very good point. Next question. How much data can actually be fit within Infobright? Are there any limitations? So from a technical limitation point of view, we have customers that really range the gamut. We have a few hundred gigs in each instance of Infobright, all the way up to hundreds to 150 terabytes within a single instance of Infobright. It's really the gamut. Again, this almost goes to the prior question in terms of overall resource availability, because the more data that you have, of course, even though we have 10 to 1, 20 to 1 compression, you will have to store that on disk, and that disk, again, is shared with everything else. You will have to store the in-memory structure, like the knowledge grid in memory, and as your data grows, that also grows, but ever so slightly, but it's something to be considered of, especially when you're dealing in an OEM world, where once it's out the door, it's difficult to upgrade with any sort of ease. So ultimately, the data size that we typically see most of the time with our customer base is in the dozens of terabytes range. We've seen far less and we've seen far more, but ultimately it's going to depend on the architecture and the hardware that has been provided. Great. Next question. Are there any functional differences between the MySQL version and the Postgres version? And actually, the end is which is better. So right now, as Postgres is our more recent GA, initial GA release, we have more bells and whistles currently within the MySQL product. However, we are going to be achieving functional parity between the Postgres version and the MySQL version soon. It's on the roadmap to complete. In the end, we believe that depending on your use case, you would either choose the MySQL version or the Postgres version. I wouldn't necessarily make a decision today to just choose the MySQL version because the functional parity has not been yet achieved, but it will be soon. Ultimately, which is better? It almost more comes down to the licensing side of things and also the use case. If you're familiar and want to continue to use MySQL, that's great, but Postgres does offer more licensing options in case you wanted to OEM your OEM, for example. Postgres gives you a more flexible option than the MySQL version of Infobright, just because of upstream licensing from Infobright. And Michael, given that this is more of a feature function and you're the head of this particular topic, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, actually, even right now, the products are very, very comparable in terms of their feature set and capabilities. And in fact, some of our early, i.e. MySQL OEM customers have a desire to migrate over to the Postgres release and have already started down that path and completed it, and really haven't run into any significant issues. And we provide some tools that help streamline that transition. So, yeah, there's a few little nits and gnats here and there that we're addressing. We have a release slated for December the 19th, and then another release early in 2015, and we'll have one-to-one parity at that point.
Great, thank you. Next question is, can you connect to front-end tools like Pentaho and MicroStrategy? Are there any limitations with using any one of them, and in terms of just partnerships, what seems to exist? A good question. So ultimately, the reason why we use MySQL and Postgres as a wrapper around our product and our engine is entirely due to the ease of use piece to this. So regardless if you've used MySQL in the past or Postgres in the past, you can use those same programming languages because they're literally the same syntax. The additional benefit is that tools like Pentaho or MicroStrategy can connect into Infobright. Programming languages that you use today, like Perl or PHP or Python or Ruby or whatever, the tools that the connectors you use to connect into MySQL will connect into our MySQL version of Infobright. The tools you connect into the Postgres version of Infobright are the same as actual Postgres. So ultimately, we wanted to aid in the adoption of Infobright and make it easy to administer, easy to put in, with very little overhead. So all in all, yes, you can connect to front-end tools, Pentaho, MicroStrategy. You can go to all of your programming tools like SQL Developer, SQL Workbench, so on and so forth, and your programming languages as well. Next question. So the next question is, how many changes are required if you're going from MySQL to basically Infobright's version of MySQL? A very good question. So migration is a very common topic that we see within the OEM world. A lot of the times we come in and it's been 4 or 5 iterations of the given product. The initial design was great for the size, and over time compensation has been occurring, more indexes have been added, summaries have been taken, splitting the table up into many, many tables has occurred, and overall the operational simplicity has just been thrown out the window. So they look to somebody like Infobright to kind of bring in that simplicity back while achieving the scale that they're trying to get to. So from there, you can simply do a drop-in replace if you wanted to do it. So let's say revision 5 is what you're at now. Revision 6 could simply be just the drop of Infobright into the bucket with no major changes. However, we'd always look to figure out what to do. And then maybe focus on revision 6 or revision 7 or revision 8 following that to do the optimizations and tweaks and so forth. We've done really the gamut. We've done full overhauls where we change everything from schema to queries to everything else when going to the next iteration, but we've also done drop-in replacements. So when it comes to changes that are required, there are very few changes that we would require. Of course, you'd have to remove indexes. Some data types may be different, just in terms of what we would recommend for optimal knowledge grid usage. But all in all, the changes should be fairly minimal as compared to going to other more proprietary technologies that don't have the same ANSI standards as MySQL or Postgres and programming language. We did get another question regarding the slides. Ultimately, the slides will be available by this time tomorrow. So you should get a webinar link that will allow you to replay this. So if you would like to watch this presentation again or provide it to a colleague, please feel free to do so. And at this point, I don't have any additional questions. Michael, do you have any on your end, any additional questions from private messages or anything?
No, I don't. I think you got them all.
Well, very good. Well, thank you again, Michael, for your time today, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Infobright. You can reach us at info@infobright.com or reach out to us on our Twitter account or Facebook page. So please feel free to reach out at any time, and we'll be glad to assist. And with that, we wish you a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.